You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Hello and welcome to episode 144 of Making Tracks, brought to you by those fine folk over at fanthatracks.com. My name's Mark, I'm one of your co-hosts, and joining me this week is a man who, well, you know, he's just a man, a very simple man who makes his way through the galaxy and writes loads of stuff for Star Wars Insider, Stars.com, and of course Fantha Tracks. It's Mr. Mark Newbold!
Hey, it's Mark here from Fantha Tracks. How are you, Mark?
Is that your ident things when people ask you to record one for other podcasts? Is that what you say? You can go, hi.
That's literally what I say. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark from Fantha Tracks.
Fanta or Fantha?
Well, we've had Fanta.
Yeah.
We get Bantha Tracks a lot.
Bet. How's things? How's your week in Star Wars been?
As always, time travel is doing its worst to make time go way quicker than it should. This time last week, we were at Olympia at London Film and Comic Con. This week has just whistled by. I've had a quiet work week, so it's been quite good. I thought it was good in the sense that I thought, well, great, I can get a bunch of Fantha stuff done. We get a bunch of Insider and StarWars.com and all the other bits and bobs that I do and really get stuck in. And I have ticked off most things from the list and chased people down and blah, blah, blah. But good grief, this week has gone quick and it's been nice and warm and it's getting hotter.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, it is getting hotter. Yesterday, I was at the Four Kingdoms Adventure Park in Newbury with the Rebel Legion, the UK Garrison and the Mando Mercs, and we were basically melting outside. It was all in support for the Royal British Legion Day that they have there. It's not like a theme park where you've actually got big kind of rides and stuff. It's more grassroots from that. But they do this weekend once or twice a year where they send out a lot of tickets to the armed forces and their families so they can come along and enjoy the park basically. And of course yesterday I think it hit about 28 degrees, which I know for probably some people listening in warmer climates they'll be like 28 degrees is nothing, but even in an X-Wing pilot costume I was feeling it. The sweat patches when the costumes came off was not nice. It was not a pretty sight in that changing room.
That's not the kind of patch trading you want to be doing though, is it?
No, it's definitely not the kind of patch trading we want to be doing. But it was good fun. You know, we helped raise some money for the Royal British Legion, which of course is a really fantastic and still ongoing charity. And we had a flyby by, I think it was a Spitfire, or it might have been a Hurricane. I don't know my World War II planes very well. There's guys in the garrison who can tell you everything about the different planes and, you know, the sounds and stuff. But yeah, I'm not that well versed, which, you know, I probably should be really, bearing in mind that I am an X-Wing pilot. Anyhow, have you had much in your collection this week?
This week, via Star Wars Zone organiser Dave Tree, all the cool stuff, I had a lovely box of stuff come through. So my vintage collection Shea Vizsla's come, and my Lando in the outlandish shirt with the neckerchief, Battlefront 2 figure, which looks amazing. So I'm really pleased with that. And kind of on the flip side, the Black Series Black Kassantan figure, which in terms of the box art looks amazing, but in terms of the figure,
absolutely trash. It's just a repaint of Chewbacca, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not good for such an important character and such a cool looking character, and a character they brought into the show and did such a good job of making him undoubtedly a Wookiee.
Yeah,
but having his own unique look. Carey Jones, just his eyes just was so unique and just looked so on point in Book of Boba Fett. To bring out the figure that they did, hopefully there'll be a revisit to Kassantan, maybe a photoreal version based on the mask from the show. I don't know, but they need to do something. It's not pretty.
No, it's not. Maybe they weren't expecting that figure to be as popular as he was, really, because I think he was probably the standout character from the Book of Boba Fett.
It wouldn't surprise me one iota, and this isn't a dig at Hasbro, it's just the way the world turns. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't even know Kassantan was in the show. So this is, I'm waggling the air quotes, probably purely based on his comic appearances and nothing to do with the show. Because when you see him in the show, you know, they've done a great job of translating that comic version to reality. And Kassantan, in books and comics, he's got his own sort of one-shot out, collating some stuff from other issues, which is great.
Great read.
Yeah, and he's kind of a character of the moment. They didn't quite stick the landing with the figure, I'm afraid.
No. Hey-ho, as we know with Hasbro, if there's not going to be one figure of a certain character, you can guarantee there's going to be at least 2 or 3 different iterations over the years, so I'm sure we don't have to worry too much. One thing I did actually pick up from LFCC, which I don't actually think I mentioned on the live record that we did, 2 very vintage Star Wars badges. So these are the Image Factory pin badges from 1977, which says on it, Darth Vader lives. And I've got them in 2 sizes. So I've got them in the kind of a smaller, what I'd say the classic pin badge for us in the UK, which is probably about 1.5 inch, and the slightly bigger 2.5 inch badge. But of course, these are ones which has just a Darth Vader Macquarie concept looking Darth Vader helmet.
Yeah.
And they've spelled Darth Vader Vadar. Vader. But there you go. So when things first started coming out and licensing wasn't really part of what it is nowadays, so control for content and, you know, quality and spelling of characters wasn't quite as it was.
That's true. That happened a lot, though, didn't it, back then? They spelled Wookiee with 1 E, they spelled lightsaber BRE, and there's all sorts of little weird spelling. Hans Solo, there's all sorts of stuff, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure somebody somewhere has a little focus purely on the incorrect spellings of Star Wars characters and terminology. And also, obviously, for us, I always struggle when I see people writing lightsaber RE. Even though if you speak to Fast from Silver Sabers, there's a complete understanding and reason why you spell it like that in the UK, but I'm just like, no, it's ER.
Well, before you move on, as somebody who ran for 10 years a site called Lightsaber, BRE, who came across this all the time, if you go to quite early Star Wars literature, comics, even the American comics, they spell it BRE.
Yeah.
And this week, Mark Hamill revealed that George Lucas would say, when people said, well, is it Han Solo or Han Solo? Is it Leia or Leia? He'd say, well, people from around the galaxy say things differently anyway, so basically shrugged his shoulders. And we've had like 20 years of Lucasfilm telling us it's executor, not executor. It's AT-AT, not AT-AT, because if it was AT-AT, it would be AT-ST. And it's like, that literally makes no sense. So thank you, George, for clarifying that we were right all along.
Well, exactly. Well, to be fair, also, he said Hoth and Hoth. George is probably the only person I've ever heard pronounce Hoth as Hoth, but there you go. Yeah. You can't argue with George. The other thing I got, and also kind of from a very early era of Star Wars, it's from the office of the Executive Director of National Publicity for 20th Century Fox. And it's part of the original press release, and it's basically the cast list for Star Wars as it was sent out to all the press and news agencies back when they were started to do publicity for Star Wars. So I picked that up. I think that in itself is quite nice just to have some stuff like that. So I think I might start trying to pick up some more press kit type stuff from the early days. Back
in the days when cast and crew list would fit on one side of A4 as opposed to a ream of A4 like it does now.
Yeah, very interesting. A little fun thing to just file away and probably forget I have in 6 months' time.
Shall we get into some news?
Let's do it.
Last weekend we were at London Film and Comic Con. We had a blast. We were both there representing Fantha Tracks. We both did a Making Tracks Live, which was for the audience only. It was for people only in the room. So if you weren't there, you didn't hear it and we didn't record it. So it was a one-off thing. We had Adam Christopher and Misty Roses with us. Really good fun, wasn't it?
I had fun because I've done very few panels like that, and especially one which was so rammed with people and stuff. Yeah, it's a bit disorientating, and it's odd actually because, well, Mulcaster, you've played in front of 6,000 people with bands and stuff, and it's true. But actually, it's something you feel slightly even more exposed when you do a panel, partly because there's only you and 2 other people up on the stage, and obviously 2 of those people are the guests, so they're more likely to think, what the hell are you going on about? So...
That can we just clarify, we didn't do the podcast in front of 6,000 people. No. There were quite a few there, though, which was great fun. It was fun, it was brilliant. We got some lovely photographs on Fantha Tracks, but one of the coolest things I would say of the whole weekend, bearing in mind there was ourselves, there was obviously you guys with the Legion and the UK Garrison, Mando Mercs, other groups within the Star Wars zone, all shaking tins and rattling pots to raise money for Angelman, which is Fantha Tracks' nominated charity. And over the weekend, we raised £988.08, which is a bit tidy. And Jez, the running stormtrooper, who I interviewed on stage on Friday, he was selling off the remaining medals that he had made to raise money for charity. And he made £721.50. So all told, the Star Wars Zone raised over 1,700 quid for charity.
A good weekend was had by everybody from the Rebel Legion and the UK Garrison who were there, who I've spoken to since then, said it was a really fun atmosphere. It was busy on the Saturday, and steady on like the Friday and the Sunday, which actually was quite good because the whole weekend had been like it was on Saturday, I think.
Oh, yeah.
We would have been totally destroyed, and I certainly would have needed more than just a one day off this week. But that being said, yeah, fantastic. And, so it's nice that we're able to do stuff like this and work with the other clubs and, from Fantha Tracks, work with the costume clubs, Generation Skywalker and the Star Wars Sessions guys and everybody else to really kind of pull it together, and all the Cool Stuff team who were running those sideshow kind of games, which were really fun. And I did have a go at the Porg shoot in my Stormtrooper, and of course it didn't go down very well. I think in the end I actually walked up to it and just used to bust my blaster just to wipe them all off of the top of the boxes, because Stormtrooper aiming is as you would imagine it would be in Star Wars, or at least how it's portrayed by most of Star Wars anyway.
Yes, I felt for you, man. I felt for you. You were doing a lot of posing, though, which was good. But like you say, Star Wars Sessions guys were great fun. Generation Skywalker are always brilliant. Darth Elvis was performing every day as part of his 15th anniversary tour, and he was awesome, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, and I think if anybody hasn't had a chance to see Darth Elvis, you must make it a must-see thing for next year, because I'm sure he will be popping up one place or another for Star Wars Celebration Europe.
Hi, this is Samantha Aline, the first female Stormtrooper in Star Wars, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So even though it's not strictly a trilogy, because there's 4 films with a 5th one coming next summer, the first 3 Indiana Jones movies are being shown at the Prince Charles Cinema, which is just off Leicester Square in London. It starts on the 5th of August with Raiders of the Lost Ark, even though it should start with Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, because technically... Anyway, I'm being a nerd. And Raiders on the 5th of August, Temple of Doom on the 2nd of September, Last Crusade on the 17th, 19th and 21st of September. So they're showing all 3 of the original movies in 4K as well. So the quality is going to be fantastic. I'm seriously tempted to go and see one, if not all of these films on that big screen. I don't know which one I want to go and see. Which one would you choose if you had a choice of the 3 original indies to go and see?
The initial and obvious answer is Raiders, but very tempted to see Last Crusade, because I don't think I've seen that for a while. The other 2 I think have popped up on TV fairly recently. I was at the Prince Charles Theatre not so long ago, and I watched Octopussy with a couple of good mates. And it's actually the first time I've been to the Prince Charles Theatre, which is a very strange kind of cinema when you think about it, compared to modern theatres. Very old school, which is actually quite nice. And I think when we go to watch, these films that have been out for 30, 40 years, for me anyway, it's nice just to kind of experience it in a slightly different environment as well. How about yourself?
Well, I've said for years that after Star Wars and Empire, my next 2 favourite films are Raiders and Blues Brothers, and that's been pretty immutable for a long time. I think that era of filmmaking, just sort of 77 to sort of 84, is still, nothing's come close to that for me anyway. I'd never seen Raiders on screen. As a kid, I had the choice one day to see either Raiders or Condor Man, and I'd seen a clip of Raiders on one of the kids' shows, like Magpie or something like that looked quite scary, and I thought 10-year-old me didn't fancy that. So we went to see Condor Man instead, which was a regret until about 2010 when I'd interviewed Robert Watts and put him in touch with Dave Tree, and Dave invited Robert to Fordingbridge for the Fordingbridge Film and TV Festival, which was like a precursor to Farthest From. Very different, but before he started Farthest From, they had a screening of Raiders, and Robert Watts brought his original, the Idol from the beginning, and did a talk before the show, which was amazing. So finally, I got to see Raiders, on the big screen. It was a screen at Fordingbridge Town Hall where Farthest From is held, but nevertheless, I saw Raiders on the big screen. But Temple of Doom, I think I only ever saw on the big screen once back in 84 when it came out. So I think, even though it's not my favourite indie, out of the 3, it's my least favourite, I would probably go for Temple of Doom on the 2nd of September.
One thing that, from somebody who works in film, TV, and especially because I work in DI and post-production, stuff like that, one of the benefits of 4K is the fact that you can rescan these 35mm negatives up to the 4K resolution, and it's given these older prints a new lease of life. Sometimes they go through restoration process, which is fine, depending on the creators involved and the directors involved. They may tweak stuff. I mean, I think with the Raiders and with the Indiana Jones, they redid all the optical effects, tried to kind of smooth out some of the transitions and stuff like matte lines. A bit like they did the special edition. So I think it's quite nice to see a pristine version of these films. Also means that future generations can go back and revisit Indiana Jones films and Star Wars films and James Bond films very easily. And for me anyway, I think it's nice because it's a way of preserving our legacy that I think up until probably about 10 years ago, the film industry was quite worried about it, because it's like, what do you do with all these films? You can't keep on just storing them to the next format, hoping that, they're going to be preserved for forever, And so luckily, because of stuff like ACEs and all the colour workflows now, we are able to preserve stuff and maintain the quality of these prints going forward. So for me, regardless what it is, get it on the big screen. Let's enjoy it where it belongs to be seen.
I love what you said there, but something you say there just made me think. Going back to 96, 97, when Lucas decides to do the special edition, the Star Wars special edition, not Empire and Jedi, that came after, but the Star Wars special edition, and he kind of does a clean up, and they do a lot of work to make the print look better and tidy it up, and then add the visual effects, which in its day were amazing, and it blew our minds and made a buttload of money and was good business for everybody. Do you think if Lucas back then had the option of 4K as something he could have done, do you think he would have still done a special edition, or do you think he would have done a 4K remaster of Star Wars? Because like you say, you can reline up the opticals, you can get rid of matte lines, you can improve the depth and quality of certain layers of optical shots to make them look more solid. They could have sort of relined it all up, which is basically what it was, just putting the jigsaw together again, but made it look more substantial, just because somebody like yourself could come in and do colour correction to make this fit that better in a way that they didn't have the option to do back then. Do you think that would have been something to have thought of? Or do you think George really did want to stick that Jabba the Hutt scene in, or really did want to put the shuttle Tydirium into Empire, or whatever it was?
Yeah, I think it's both, to be honest. Basically, when we're talking about 4K, we're just talking about resolution. So we're just talking about an increase in resolution. So obviously we're going from, for everybody back in 97, really, standard definition, very small 4x3 screens. The closest was 2K, which is the equivalent resolution to HD. It's a big jump, but it's not a massive jump. But then obviously you go to 4K, which is basically 4 times the resolution of HD. So it comes down to the fact that ultimately you're only going to be as good as the original negative cameras and optics that you use. So because they shot a lot of the visual effects, they used VistaVision cameras. They've got more resolution than 35mm, and that meant that you could actually, composite all these elements together and maintain the quality. Then yeah, I think he would harness the technology as best as he can do, which is basically what he did. But I think he's still going to use it as an excuse to slide in that Jabba the Hutt scene and tweak the handshot first scene, and then obviously redo the whole Battle of Yavin. I don't imagine that would be any difference. The only difference would have been actually if he was able to scan to 4K, then would have been an even bigger processing nightmare for all the CG, because processing everything at 4K and above, you have such big bottlenecks in the rendering pipeline sometimes that actually that might have been the downfall. So he might have been able to get the image to 4K, but I wonder if ILM would have been able to handle an actual 4K native CGI pipeline throughout. Maybe there might have had to be some compromises there. You need the pioneers, and George has always been a pioneer. He shot Attack of the Clones in digital and in HD. First high-definition cameras used on a film, but they had loads of issues from what I've been told by people who were working at Sony at the time with the cameras, and so it wasn't an easy process. It was made to look easy to the rest of the industry and to the public, because obviously one of George's remits in his life and one of the things he wanted to do was continuously improve the quality of the viewing experience through like THX and the TAP program, but also the tools that the cinematographer has. So I think he probably would have done.
Well, speaking of Lucas being a visionary, this week we interviewed Brian Volk-Weiss from The Toys That Made Us, but he's also the producer of Icons Unearthed, the documentary, 6-part documentary that started this week in the States on Vice TV, notable for interviewing Marcia Lucas. This week I had the chance to speak to Brian, and we're going to bring it out later this week as a special episode of Making Tracks. In there, the fact that George is a visionary and a forward-thinking man is very much at the front of the conversation. So stay tuned to Fantha Tracks and listen later this week to Making Tracks for another special episode, and we'll get a little bit more into that old classic Star Wars era.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Last week's London Film and Comic Con, we had the opportunity to talk to a number of guests from the Star Wars galaxy. Two people that we did have time to sit down and talk to were Susanna Malak and TaMara Carlson Woodard. Both worked on The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. we won't say any more. We'll just let you listen to this really cool and charming interview where we spoke to both these ladies at the Fantha Tracks booth. So this is me and Mr. Mulcaster talking to TaMara Carlson Woodard and Susanna Malak at London Film and Comic Con in the Star Wars Zone. We're just making it up as we go along. So we're at the Fantha Tracks booth. We're here with Susanna and we're here with TaMara, and we're going to talk about their experiences in the new Star Wars TV shows. I'll start with you, TaMara. Hello, welcome to Fantha Tracks.
Hi, thank you for having me.
First things first, what is your Star Wars journey? How did you get into this world?
Wow. Well, my first introduction to it was growing up with Star Wars and protecting my strawberry shortcake dolls from my brother's stormtroopers. Yeah, he was one of the kids that would take all of his action figures and like take the extra ones and burn them like they'd have been in fights, and then if my toys were anywhere near them, they might get dragged into that. So
like a twisty Toy Story.
Yeah. So that was my introduction. And then cut to working at Legacy Effects, and them getting the contract to, we have Legacy has a relationship with Favreau from all the Iron Man films and stuff like that, and so they got contracted to do creatures and different things.
And what was it you did at Legacy?
So I'm a fabricator at Legacy, and I do a lot of their puppets, and so I was tasked with the early development of Grogu. At the time, didn't have a name. So the computer designer, Scott Patton, he teamed with me and said kind of the direction that we were going, or they wanted to go with the puppet. So I made a prototype body and made a costume based on some needs we thought the puppet was going to have. At the time, they weren't sure if it was going to be CG or practical, like how much the balance would be. So you'll see the early version of the puppet, or the early costume, has a really big collar. That was so that baby could hide his ears in it, so we could tuck it up.
Nice.
And then as we started to use him in the show, it was obvious that he wasn't really going to hide, and so the collar is folded down and kind of big, and but that's become kind of this iconic issue for the baby. But that's how my involvement started, is I was tasked with doing that project. And we were also making the Mandalorian costumes. So when it was time to go to set, I'm also a specialty costumer. So union needs, I met union needs by being on the show as a costumer. So first season, did some puppeteering on the baby, just as a fifth rotator in, and handled a lot of the creatures. Susanna here was one of our Jawas, and she fits a lot of our creature heads, so I would handle them, get them dressed, give them air, keep them alive.
That's quite important.
Yes.
Keep talent alive.
Help trying to keep them alive.
Very important.
Make sure they drink water.
Yeah, if I don't get that water and I don't get that air, I'm screwed. So I don't piss her off. If I piss her off, I'm not getting any air. I'm not getting any water.
No, I just might be a little slower, but no, I would never do that to you. But yeah, so that's how I got in, and then each season we've kind of developed a relationship with the crew. It truly is a family. And so we just kind of do anything that's thrown at us. And then from my involvement with that, I was able to be in the costume for Max Rebo for Book of Boba Fett. So that was a lot of fun.
That must have been a bit special.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty fun. So I turned 50 that month, and I got
Join the club.
Oh, yay! But I got to overcome a lot of fears that I've had. Like, I grew up playing the piano, but I always hated it because I would have panic attacks and freeze.
So do you know how to play the piano with your feet?
Now I do. But it's still debatable. Are they my feet or my hands? No, they're feet.
Is it a butt crack or an armpit? That's always my question.
Well, it depends on what angle it's shot at. It's really weird.
A bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a little bit of a butt back there, but I never got back there. So.
And Susanna, how did you get into this crazy world?
So I'm with the casting agency, and one day I get a phone call, and they were like, "Well, would you like to work on a show? It's Star Wars." And my first reaction was, "How much is the pay?" And they just started laughing because they were like, "Out of all the people that we've called, you're the first person that just asked about the pay and didn't say, Star Wars is, it's my lifelong dream, da-da-da-da." So that's how I got into that. And then they've loved me ever since.
Yeah.
And I've been on Mandalorian 1, Mandalorian 2. Mandalorian 3 comes out in February. Mm-hmm. I've done Boba Fett. And what I love about it is feels like everything's like family orientated.
Yeah.
That's why I love going back. You know, I can just say, screw it, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
You know, it's our choice. They call us and ask us if we want to work it. But love it. I love it to death, and I would keep going back as long as they keep wanting me back.
Yeah.
And so far, so good. I didn't piss anybody off yet, so that's a good thing. But I love it. It's just great, and the food is great.
That's the main thing. If the craft is good,
The craft is awesome.
Shout out to Craft.
Yeah, craft services, I love you. Yeah, the food is amazing that they put on there. I mean, and every day it never fails you what they put on there.
Yeah.
Just love it.
can be hungry now.
Oh yeah, huh?
And Susanna, she's one of my personal favorite creatures.
Oh, I love you.
I love you too. No, but it takes a special person with a certain mental fortitude to do what we do with you guys.
Yes. and I play a couple creatures.
Yeah.
You know, I play as a Jawa, I play as Gas Mask, I play as a Binbot, looks like a trash can, and I play, what am I missing?
It's called Thotobin from one of the shows.
Yeah, so it's been a task. Some are harder than others, but...
Which one's your preference then?
I can tell you which one it isn't.
Most?
Panic attack, and they should be like, suck it up, you're good. Suck it up, you're good. That Binbot was, I think, the easiest thing to put on, because you just go in it.
It's literally a trash can that's been dressed up to look like a...
Is that from Book of Boba Fett? Or?
Well, we have a lot of assets that are being used from the other films that were sent from Lucasfilm, and we just kind of rotate them around, and we do fittings with these guys to see like who works best in what. So the Binbot's been in a couple different things.
And do you just do you literally just move that costume from one production to the next, or do you kind of redress it? You know, maybe add a bit more creeblies or paint it up again, or do you just kind of keep it the same?
It depends. The first 1 or 2 seasons, they were assets that belonged here. We were not allowed to do anything to alter them.
Sure.
So, and we're very careful about that. Now I believe that our production company has bought them and owns them, so we can alter them to fit people in different ways if we need to, or if production designer decides that they need to look a little more aged or whatever, we can do that to them. So,
was there a sense of when you started, it's a new venture and nobody really knows how it's going to land, and then season 1 comes out and it goes great guns and everyone like us is going nuts for it, so does that give you guys a little bit more freedom, a little bit more latitude? Is that how it's? You say about having been able to do these things, for example, to the assets as you call them.
Yeah.
That's earned, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels a little bit like it. It's kind of hard to say because right when we got into the swing of things, COVID hit.
Yeah.
So everything changed, and so like I don't think we really got into the swing of
COVID.
The swing of things because literally everything changed about how we had to do our production. Like the way we work with each other.
The way we even eat. Like we couldn't eat certain places. Usually you can go eat and have a drink anywhere. There, no. You had to be in certain areas. Right. It was crazy. And then seemed like it shortened down. Like Mandalorian 1, we had like 24 Jawas?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Hit or miss. When we went to Boba Fett, it was, I think, a handful of Jawas. So it really, because that was during COVID.
Yeah.
So they wanted to use the same one because you don't want too many people on the set.
Exactly.
It seemed like everything just shrunk.
Yeah.
So, that was...
Now I think we're starting to get back into the swing of things because things are easing up and opening up, and we kind of have a routine where we know how to rotate around each other and you know what things we can do. Like, you know, if you have less people, you can't make changes really quickly and all that kind of stuff.
And just as an experience, as a whole thing, as this part of your life, which is continuing, of course, it must be. I mean, you say you're not a big Star Wars fan, so
I'm getting into it now just because now I'm in it. So now I have to realize what I'm getting into and what's going on. Because sometimes I'm clueless. You know, it's just. We live and learn, right?
Yeah,
we live and learn. I mean, and this is not my only job.
No.
You know, I've been working for the federal government for going on 20 years now.
Wow.
So, you know, I always got to try to maneuver stuff around. And what I love about working on the set is because they always work around me.
That's great.
So that's the good of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how do you find it actually keeping 2 jobs going? Are they quite understanding?
Yes, and that's why I've been able to keep progressing with it is because they understand their work, like fittings, COVID tests certain times. I try to work around. Well, they do work around my other schedule, and that's what I love about it. Cool. Yeah, it's awesome.
And for you, this is strawberry shortcake's revenge, isn't it? This is perfect for you.
Purple pie eater. Yes.
And so you can't say anything else, and we wouldn't want to ask you, but there's more stuff coming. Are you excited for what's on the horizon?
I am. I'm
always have to be excited.
Yeah. It's really neat to be a part of a project that touches people in the way this has touched people. Like, I worked on the first Iron Man, and that was amazing to see, everybody's wearing a little Iron Man costume at Halloween, and there's Iron Man stuff here and there. But something about this, the way it's touched people, and I don't know if it's just the timing, but the way Baby Grogu makes everybody happy. I don't know anybody that doesn't really like him.
Makes your heart a little fuzzy.
Yes.
I have a life-size sideshow.
Oh, yeah,
table,
nice.
And he's kind of sat in the corner next to the TV, and every now and again we make eye contact, and you just can't help but smile and go, "Oh, bless you."
Yeah.
You're all softy.
I know.
See, you just learned something about him today.
Yeah.
If he's having a bad day, you know what you do? Tell him go home and look at Grogu in the corner. Be on timeout with Grogu, right?
Initially, I do feel bad that I have put Baby in the corner.
Yes,
there's nowhere else to put him. So.
Yeah. There's one animal on the planet. My cat does not like Baby Grogu.
Really?
I have the Build-A-Bear version, and it's got the sound in it.
Yeah.
And wherever you are in the house, if you push the sound, Ginsu, my cat, will wake up from where she is and run over and try to bite it. And if she doesn't bite it, then she'll just turn and bite whoever pressed the button.
Wow.
So, she's a sweetheart.
It's a jealousy
she does
thing.
not like.
It's a jealousy thing, I guarantee you.
That's the only person that Baby Grogu has
Everyone
not.
can be a fan.
So is that what you guys call him on set, Baby Grogu, or does it refer to as Baby, or
Yeah, that's a good question. Never thought of that.
A lot of times it depends on what's happening in the moment. If it's fast paced, it's like the kid, get the kid. He has his own code name, because we go by code names, but he's got his own code name. Before his name was actually Grogu, it was the child. Just bring the child. But now it depends on who's saying it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And obviously, if this is something you can't really discuss, but do you, now that you've got the baby, are you is Legacy kind of reiterating him and improving him for season to season, or is he now kind of a realised thing and he doesn't get upgraded as such?
Well, he's a fully realised thing, but like everybody, we need a little something every now and then, get a little dirty.
A little tweak.
Yeah. So there's a few little adjustments we make depending on what the shot is. Like, he's got cute little arms, but sometimes cute little arms can't reach everything they need to reach. So, he's built in a way where we can, kind of to make little tweaks here and there.
A bit more articulation.
And then for the scenes where the baby's training with Luke, we had to. Production wanted the puppeteers to do a lot more stuff with that, so there were little tweaks we made here and there. I have different, the costumes started to wear out, so I'll do little tweaks and upgrade them to keep them fresh. When he eats and throws up on himself, like
nice.
The cleanup crew.
Bit of frog.
Yeah.
Macaroons.
What's this blue barf? Like?
Yeah.
No, but he's a great puppet. He's lasted a long time, But he needs some cleanup here and there. Yeah, what is that?
That's the kicking out voice.
Oh.
You recognise that?
And they're done.
You don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here.
Exactly that. That's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
We
it.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So another star has crossed galaxies from the Star Wars universe to the Marvel universe. Alden Ehrenreich is set for a key role in Ironheart, which is a new series coming from Disney+. For those that don't know, Ironheart is a character called Riri Williams. She's a genius inventor. She comes up with the most incredible suit of armour since Tony Stark invented the Iron Man armour. No idea what role Alden is playing in the show. First things first, Mark, are you happy to see Alden Ehrenreich in a major role again?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. He kind of got a bit stitched up with Solo. I think at least he ended up being a little bit of a scapegoat, I think, for things completely out of his control. So yes, absolutely. And always nice to see Star Wars actors making a transition to the MCU.
Yeah, there's been a few, hasn't there, going backwards and forwards. The most prominent one you would think of, even though it wasn't a transition per se, but Samuel L. Jackson obviously being Mace Windu and then turning up as Nick Fury in the Avengers films and onwards. Emilia Clarke, obviously from Solo as well. She's going to be appearing in Secret Invasion. And there's been others. Ben Mendelsohn, Krennic in Rogue One. He stepped across to play as Skrull in Captain Marvel, and again he was in Far From Home at the very end, impersonating Nick Fury. So there's been a few actors that have made the crossover. How do you feel about that? I love the fact that you see these actors that we love from Star Wars appearing in Marvel, but by the same token, especially in the case of Alden Ehrenreich, there's a big part of me screaming at the wall going, why aren't you playing Solo again?
You're absolutely right. And of course, we're forgetting Oscar Isaac was in Moonlight.
There's actually loads, isn't there?
There's more than you realise. And I think the thing is, the nature now, I guess, of big franchises, everybody's going to be in a franchise. You know, you've got Mads Mikkelsen in Harry Potter and Star Wars.
And Doctor Strange.
And that is a thing, isn't it? It's like the kind of the nature of tentpole franchises. There's going to be a certain group of actors who will appear in every single one. Where it becomes harder to accept as a viewer is when you've got somebody, let's say if we took Chris Evans, who was Captain America and made Captain America his own character, and then he was plonked into Star Wars. That might be a little bit harder to accept, because it's that whole thing, isn't it, of like sometimes when you see a mannerism and it's like, oh, but that's what Captain America did. If Chris Evans turned around and go, hey, that's a galaxy's ass, something like that, you'd be like, okay,
I could do this all parsec.
Exactly, yes. So, you know, it would be like, okay, hang on a sec, let's walk the pack. Fair as that, but I think ultimately, for so many franchises, trying to find unknown actors is probably really difficult, especially now that we're talking about the stakes for some of these productions are so high. Giving an unknown actor the ability to run with and support, or actually star in like a $250 million plus film is a lot of money. So yeah, it's difficult, but I mean, he should be in Solo 2. I don't see why there hasn't been a Solo 2. I don't necessarily think that it would be Disney losing face or anything if they just said, let's make a Star Wars streaming series about it. You know, I think a lot of people kind of felt after Solo, well, that's where you could run this. You could even run it in a way whereby episodes where Donald Glover comes back as Lando. We haven't heard anything about that Lando series, if it's even still greenlit and still actually on the slate. But Donald Glover could come back, do a couple of episodes. You could have a couple of episodes with Alden, and you could have a couple of episodes with Emilia, and then maybe then there's a meetup. You know, there's that kind of crossover episode at the end. So they could all have a separate episodes and storylines and stuff like that, which could then obviously help to branch off into the expanded universe and Marvel Comics and stuff like that. So I think there's loads of options, you know, and I think there's enough support. There'd be a bigger support for a solo streaming series rather than maybe a second movie. What's your thoughts on that?
I very much agree with that. I think, whilst I'd love to see a second movie, and I still go back, and I've said it on the show before, when we came out of Leicester Square and you were there on the square and we were all bouncing up and down because we were that excited about what we'd just seen and how much fun it was with a capital F.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. You know, it just had that fizzing energy that Star Wars does so well. Mm-hmm. And it was a disappointment that it didn't connect with the box office audience. And it just seems so obvious that you look back to May of 2018 and go, well, no wonder Infinity War was out and Deadpool 2 was out and Ready Player One was out and there was animated stuff out. You know, there's all sorts of stuff out that month. Poor old Star Wars that wasn't promoted correctly and people thought it was the next film after Last Jedi and all sorts of stuff. Had no chance. Never has a Star Wars film been given such a lousy chance at making money at the box office as Solo. So it certainly wasn't down to the quality of the film. And they clearly had faith in the movie because they filmed 70% of it or something insane like that with Lord and Miller, and then basically got Ron Howard to go back and reshoot the whole thing. If they thought it was such a write-off, if they had so little faith in it, this script by, for goodness sake, Lawrence Kasdan of all people, they would have just written it off and gone, it didn't work. They could have buried that. It would have been a footnote in Star Wars history if they'd wanted it to be. But they didn't. They believed in it to basically remake it. So it's going out there at massive expense. And then they pull the rug from under its own feet. It never quite made sense to me why they did that. But certainly if Alden pulls a blinder in Ironheart and people come out of that show going, wow, Alden was great, wasn't he? Maybe that's enough fuel for them to go, you know, maybe we should be revisiting Solo. He's a bit older now. It's sort of 4 or 5 years on from when he made Solo. So maybe he's matured a bit. He's got a bit more of that. I was going to say Ford swagger. That's not fair because we've got to get beyond that if we ever want to see Han Solo again. But enough of the Solo swagger to translate into doing something like you say, I think, on Disney Plus would be the arena for it. Because, yeah, you can bring Donald Glover in he can do his Lando show, but he can still turn up in this.
Yeah.
And Amelia can be doing whatever she's doing, but she can still come back as Kira. And you get Eunice back as Chewie. You get the gang back together to a certain degree. Let's tell some cool one-off, like Strange New Worlds is doing for Star Trek, one-off adventures every week. Let's not have a whole through line through the season. We don't need to do that. Let's just tell 6 or 7 Han Solo adventures, each episode 45 minutes. Do that.
One thing that I was thinking about is that maybe the problem was Alden was maybe a little bit too old. It felt like there wasn't a big enough jump between Alden's Han and then Harrison Ford's Han that we see in A New Hope. Whereas you think now, if you take, say, for example, Vivian Lara Blair, who's played Princess Leia in Kenobi, now she is only 10 years old. Who's to say how long she wants to continue acting? You know, we see all the time. There's the potential that actually that's how you get on board with a recasting of Princess Leia or some of these characters, isn't it? Is that actually you take them back to a point way beyond where you've got a reference point and you create that character again with a younger star who could potentially, for the next 10 or 20 years or however long she wants to do it, could play that character. So maybe that's what they need to do with Han. I mean, they did it with Luke. I mean, we didn't really get to see a huge amount from the guy who plays Luke in Kenobi, but there's that potential that maybe, again, you can follow that through and you could actually see these actors grow up on screen and really inhabit that role as they go on to other Star Wars films in the future.
Hi, this is Dorian Kinji, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So on Fantha Tracks Radio, we finally have a collecting podcast. It's called Collecting Tracks. It's hosted by Chris Leddy from Six Scale Scavengers and Richard Hutchinson from The Vintage Rebellion and, of course, Fantha Tracks. We've wanted a collecting show on the network since the network started, and we've finally got it. First episode came out last week. It's called Before the Wars. Richard and Chris talk about all the stuff, or as much as they can fit into a 49-minute episode, that came out around the time of the film. Really, really early doors type stuff. Very much like, Mark, funny enough, the Darth Vader badge that you were talking about earlier. I thought it was a fascinating topic to kick off a collecting show with. Have you got any other stuff from that sort of era other than that particular badge?
I probably have, yeah. I mean, that kind of very early Star Wars vintage stuff is, yeah, there's bits and bobs like, you know, the book. It sounds really bad, but sometimes stuff like those badges and stuff, they'll get plonked in a drawer and they'll probably get forgotten about, and I might end up buying another set in 5 years' time or something. But yeah, I've got areas of collection which is mainly vintage stuff. Obviously got the vintage toys and stuff, but we're talking about before that, really, aren't we? We're talking about before that, you know, Kenner could even get their their machine up and running and producing stuff. So yeah, I mean, before the wars, I mean, you know, you talk about the dark time between the end of the vintage line and Hasbro started doing Power Force 2 and that, but really the dark times is anything before May 25th, 1977.
Well, I mean, the novel came out in 76, so that's hitting shelves and selling copies. I mean, it was selling before the film came out. Marvel started their run in the States before the film came out. So there was all these things that happened then that today is undreamt of. Marvel are just doing their adaptation of season 1 of The Mandalorian, and it's 3 years since that hit television. And this was months before the film came out. So they were very savvy and canny in getting the word out and doing what we sort of think of as the easy wins, like stickers and so on, iron-on stuff and the patches, cardboard-based games, loads, and they talk about this in the episode, loads of unlicensed items as well, which is fascinating. So go and check it out. It's on every 6th Friday on Fantha Tracks Radio, so it's part of the Friday night rotation of episodes that we've got going on there. So we've now, I think, got our roster together. Wave 1 of Collecting Tracks Before the Wars with Chris and Richard, and that'll be coming to Fantha Tracks Radio every 6th Friday.
Well, that's all we have time for this week, so thank you very much for joining us. And Mark, can you let everybody know how they can get in touch if they want to send us a listener's question?
Yes, we haven't had any listeners' questions for a couple of weeks, so we would love some of those. But as always, thanks for listening to Making Tracks. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You are the GOAT. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in Good Morning Tatooine live Sunday evenings, 9 o'clock UK, 4 PM Eastern, 1 PM Pacific on Facebook and YouTube, and check out Fantha Tracks Radio Friday nights at 7 PM for new episodes of the Fantha from Down Under, Planet Layer, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, and Cannon Fodder. And that's me done for this episode.
I think it's probably about me done for this episode as well. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go slip into a gold bikini, and then I can get paddling and splashing around in the paddling pool, because I think the sun has now warmed it up just enough that I won't get all cold and shriveled. And stay safe, everybody. Make sure you stay hydrated. Put on that sun cream if you're going out in the next couple of days. As always, may the force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.